Hey everyone, hope you're doing fantastic. This is Brett Tadlock, TN Artist. Wanted to kind of talk about doing master studies. I have a patron, Nigel. Hi, Nigel. And he had mentioned when he first reached out to me about trying to do some master studies and get an idea for how things were done and how to kind of lay it out in Rebelle to get a similar look. He shared with me this image and was asking how to do some of the different effects in it in Rebelle. So there's a couple different ways you can do this, and we can look really closely at some of the stuff here and then kind of go from there with it. So when doing a master study, if it's a style that you're wanting to replicate, you need to ask yourself a couple questions, and those are like, what is it about the style that I like? Is it the looseness of lines like you see here? Is it some of the bold colors, some of the textures, all those kind of things that you can see? You want to really kind of evaluate and ask yourself, what is it that you replicate? Okay. And then from there, it's a matter of just kind of breaking it down to practice on some different things and try to see if you can get a similar look and a similar feel. Obviously, you don't want to copy it and stroke for stroke and make a reproduction of it, but you do want to kind of figure out, okay, how would I get this similar effect and kind of feel? So I'm going to show you what I would do to do this, and hopefully, Nigel, this will answer your questions that you had about, well, what does this look like here, or what does that look like there, for doing it. So I think some of the main things I'm going to use here are going to be some of the oil brush and the pencil for doing some of this, and then the ink pen tool as well. So this one right here for the ink pen, and the pencil, and then the oil and acrylic brushes. So I'm going to use those to try and replicate. And again, like I said, show you how I'm going to do this. This is not the only way to do it. Okay. It's just how I would do it. And that's the only way I can teach it. So this is what I would do. And I think once you get kind of the idea of your process down, then from there you can relax and really kind of play around with that style and that feel to then make it your own. Okay. But doing this has also helped me. There are a few master studies I've done here and there of different things, and so to try and get that look from it. So what I've done here is I have this image that he provided on its own layer right there. Above it, I have a blank layer, and then above that, I have this line drawing that I did just honestly from tracing over this to give me the feel for it and the idea of how to lay it out. Nothing wrong at all doing that. If you want to trace something like this, so that way you can kind of practice around it. The advantage of tracing this and doing it this way, you're not getting hung up on the drawing, okay? Because this is about trying to replicate the feel and the textures and the colors and all that kind of stuff. So if you're sitting here sketching it out, you're going to get hung up on, well, my roof isn't going the right direction and slant, because you're going to want to replicate some of this stuff and get as close as you can to learn how to do it for it. So again, trace it. There's nothing wrong with that. People have traced forever. I mean, even the Renaissance masters, they traced. So that's where we get the word cartoon from, was from them creating big drawings that they would then punch holes along the lines and then dab it out and trace it and draw it up. So a whole bunch of ways they did that. So I'm going to start, I think, with kind of this blue area right in here and replicate some of that, because I believe that is one of the areas that Nigel was talking about. And then I'm going to go along through here and just really kind of do what you see in this area, and then maybe play around with some of this. So having said all that and having it laid out, I've got this line layer on its own layer right here. So I'll just label that line work and just call this one original. And we'll call this one paint layer. I'm just saying, I may make a couple different layers just so I can play around with stuff. That is one of the advantages you have when you're doing digital. Okay. So the colors I'm using here, these are the oil colors set available from Rebelle, so that way you can pull it up from their site. If it's not a if you don't have it standard with the thing. I do have a couple other up here that I have added to this one. These are the colors of the year from Pantone. So I've got these up here that I'm adding. So I'll share those out with the, or share the link where you can get it from. Then all you gotta do is just color sample. But or I'll share these out with my patrons. So anyway, let me pull this up here so we can take a look. I'm going to go to the line work and hit T. I'm going to bring this up here so it's similar and then kind of play around. Now, if you're doing this, like I've got my palette here, don't be afraid to color sample. Okay. You know, I wouldn't worry about maybe making this the whole color palette, but you could color sample it. So what I did first was I looked at, all right, what does the base color look like on this painting? It's kind of this off gray. So I selected that color, made that my background color, and then what I would do is go into Canvas and then go to something that looks so similar, and probably this rough paper right here. I'm not going to bother with the deckled edges, which that's what this area right around here is. That's the deckled edges. If you're doing this in Rebelle and you export it as a JPEG, you'll get this black area. If you export it as a PNG, that will stay transparent and you won't have to worry about it. So it looks really good, actually. Print it out. I printed some of my work out with a deckled edge on a regular paper, and it looks really nice. So anyway, all right. So I'm going to switch over here to the Express Oils brush here, and I'm going to go with this knife brush here, and so I'm probably going to stick with these for the most part. And I'm going to grab some of the colors I had earlier. Play around. So what I'm going to do is with a smaller brush and set on 2, I'm going to just kind of loosely smear this in. And the reason it's set on 2 is because the less pressure I use, the lighter the paint goes on. Okay. I'm just going to kind of smear that in. And it's also kind of a rougher brush, so it gives some of these painterly kind of looks and feels to it. And I'm going to grab maybe a little bit of this as well. I'm looking back and forth constantly at my reference piece. Okay. So I'm just going to, and then what I want to do is grab a little bit of this lighter color here. So I just can hold Alt and click, or you can press I and click. So I just wanted to get just, all right, so I've got some of those laid in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push 4. And I'm going to just kind of, 4 is the blending one that keeps the brush properties but lets me blend. I'm just going to blend this around a little bit, like so. And this is going to really kind of soften it. And I would do this in a couple different passes here. Okay. So I've kind of got that there. I'm going to grab a little bit darker blue color. It'll by default switch back to the 2 that I had. That's going to give me a little bit of what I'm looking for. Maybe put a little bit of that in here. So that's kind of there. And I'm going to switch this over to the eraser, which is 5. And then up here, I'm going to change that opacity down to like 4 or so. And just kind of scrub in and erase out to give me some of those lighter areas right here. Okay. Like so. Just kind of scrub it in. I can even bring it all the way back up to 100. Get a scrub there. Like so. So that's giving me a very similar feel. All right, now I want to soften this a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is, if you look, oh man, I just realized I was painting on the line art this whole time. Well, shoot. That's okay. All right, so I'm going to do this then, and it's one of the things you got to look at. If I wasn't switching around with everything, I'd be like, oh yeah, because I was, anyway. So let's switch this off of multiply back to normal. The reason I had it multiply was so that stuff would I could paint underneath it and see the lines, but you know what? Just not going to worry about it. All right, so that switched it back over. Getting kind of a weird. All right, so what I was going to say, what I may do here real quick, is hit the mask. Control X, Control V. So, bit of a hiccup there. That was my fault for not paying attention, because my hand tends to sit right here while I'm drawing and painting. So I wasn't paying attention to what layer I was on. Not a big deal. I just make a copy of it, put it on another layer below the line work, and I'm good to go. So, but you know, accidents happen, big deal. So I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm going to press B to go back to my last brush. And then I'm going to grab some of this darker color. Come in here, like so. Because again, I'm doing a master study here. I'm not worried about exactly copying this one. If I wanted to, I could. Bracket key to bring that up in size. A few more of these in here. So what I was about to say before I realized I was on the wrong layer. I'm putting this here. Now if I go over to my water and I look, that is wet. Okay. So I'm going to come over here to my water icon. I'm going to be on splat. I'm going to take this off and I'm going to lightly come over this just one little bit and wet it. Now what that's going to do is that's going to take that oil brush and it's going to give it more of a watercolor type feel. So it's going to really water it down and let it soften up some of these edges that I had in here that I don't necessarily want to keep. Okay, so it'll start blending them together. Because if I go back over to the water, you can see where it laid in and it kind of diffuses out. See how it, and that'll really soften some of it. And then from there, I can grab back to my brush. I can even go to like knife dry and keep the opacity down real low. Switch to E. Switch to number 5 for the eraser. And I can even come in and erase out some of these. Now, if I want to come in here, I can go to something like my my watercolor brush and say, for example, I can go down to spatter and get this one. Bring the size way down with my left bracket key. Put it on eraser. And I can erase out to give a little bit of texture that you can kind of see through here. If I want, I could even come to a lighter and add some in. Give it a chance. If I get it where I like it and I want to stop it, then all I got to do is just hit F and fast dry it. Okay, and that's, so now all this is still damp, but it's been dried up some. Okay, so that gives me some of that. Now this over here, I'm going to grab a little bit of that color. I'm going to go back to my Express Oils. I'm going to paint over the opacity, still kind of low. I can grab a little bit of this other color here. Bring that in. Like so. And this would be up here a little more. Okay. So one of the things when you're doing this is, you know, give yourself permission to play around with some of your brushes. You'll find that you have brushes that you like to use that do this. Like you might jump over to the glazing and switch to a filbert and be like, well, I want to put a little bit of this grayish, purplish color in there. All right, so I'm going to grab a little bit of that. And I'm going to glaze that with just a little bit. Like so. Okay. And I can bring my brush across. That's a great way to get like this look right here. So if I want that kind of thing, I just bring in this glazing brush. I can lower the opacity down. Bring it in. I can grab a little bit of this over here. Bring my size down. Okay. Like so. So the main thing with this is that even though the main piece probably did, this is a multimedia piece, it looks like. 'Cause it looks like you've got pencil and pen. It looks like you've got ink and maybe some actual watercolor and stuff as well. Doesn't mean you have to stay along the lines of what they did. System is lagging a little bit. There we go. Because you're just trying to figure out, how do I recreate this same look? Like, for example, this is one of those areas where you can play around with your brackets to change the sizes. Like so. But it's like, just kind of play around, look at what they've got here, and then ask yourself, okay, which brush do I think? Oh, well, okay, this filbert brush for the express oils kind of gives me a similar line. Okay, maybe I'll go with that. Maybe you'll say, I'm going to come over here to the ink, this dip pen. I'll bring the water down because I don't want it really heavy watered. But maybe I want to put in a bit of a dark color. Maybe that's not dark enough. It's like, well, let's go down to bone black. Oh, that gives me a little bit of a look like this. And in here I can maybe play. Well, if I notice I've got some of this color shining through, so maybe I put in a little bit here and take the water all the way down and blend these two over each other. And maybe add a little bit of this color from there, because I'm using the ink pen, which is basically a transparent color going over top. Then I can get a real good kind of a building of colors and take my time laying these out and getting the different looks. And like I said, if you do the line work, like if you want all this line work to show through, you just do like I did on another layer here. You can go back to that layer, turn off real paint, turn it to multiple, and now all of that shows through. Okay. And so if I don't want it to show through, then I just set it back to normal. But I can keep here building it up and just kind of playing around. But it's just a matter of going back and forth to the different ones. You'll find brushes that you like, that you want to create stuff with, and get that kind of a feel, and those will become your brushes. You'll make your own or buy some of mine or whatever. But like this here, just real kind of loose. All right, and so it's like, okay, I've got that loose. I like how this looks, but maybe I want to break it up a little bit. So then I can come back over to my express oils, go to my knife grainy, which is going to give me something like that, and push 4. And it makes this a smudging brush. And now I can get that cool transition. Even though that was watercolor and I'm using an oil brush, it doesn't matter because it's digital. And then I can switch back to like this blue. And if I don't like it, Control Z. Nothing lost. Okay. But I may decide, I want to switch back to this dry knife here and get that kind of a feel. And then I may be like, okay, I like that. Let me push 4 again. Kind of blend these a little bit. Maybe I'm going to blend it down because this looks like it's really kind of coming down. So I'm going to go back over it and just kind of blend it down and get that kind of. I'm going to come in here with this lighter color and just kind of blend that around. Get that kind of a feel. Okay. And then just kind of soften it down. Let me zoom out so you can see it has a definite reminiscence of this. It's not exact. I'm not trying to make an exact. I'm trying to learn from some of the strokes that I see and how I get it. Like maybe I want this look here. Okay. How am I going to get that look? Well, I think that would look really good if it was done with the ink brush or the watercolor brush. So let me just kind of come in here, get a feel of it, bring it around. Okay. Then maybe I grab the watercolor brush and let's grab, doesn't really matter. Let's go with the flat wash. Bring the water up. Maybe erase some of that. Switch to 4, kind of soften some of those edges. And the reason I switch back and forth between all these is because on some of these it's going to continue to diffuse and give me those softer edges that I want, you know, and I can play around with it and get that feel, that kind of look. And then I can come up here and say, well, let me grab a little bit of this bluish color and just maybe give a little quick swipe right here. Let me grab a little bit of this darker blue and build it up right here. And see how that diffuses. Now, if it gets to where I like it, all I got to do is I can come over here to the pause and push D, or click on the pause, and I've paused it to where I like it. So now I've got some of these nice blends, okay? So if I want to leave that like that because I like it, then I've got it paused. I can come back in over top of it and do it like that to get it where I like it, or put it on another layer if I really want to mess around with it. And then go from there and then soften it out, you know, and then just hit F to fast dry it. And now if I unpause the diffusion, it's not going to really diffuse. So you can get those really cool buildups by just working in sections. And again, if you get one thing you like, leave it, make a new layer on top, add the next bit, so you're glazing on top of each one, and do it in that way you don't mess up this. And then you can come in and put it here and there. But like I could take this section, for example, and Control X, Control V, T, and I could also, because this is 6, I can come over here to the warp and these nodules and bring it in. I twist and contort. Get it where I like it, hit enter to accept it, be on 4, and then just kind of soften some of these if I don't want them as harsh, like so. And then it's just a matter of I can come underneath it, do it again, like grabbing this color, blending it out underneath it, merge them together if I want to, and just kind of keep bringing it around. In doing that. So that's how, you know, Nigel, you asked me how would I recreate some of this stuff. That's how I would do it. I would just keep working, looking at it, saying, okay, this one looks more transparent because I can see more of the stuff underneath it. I'll grab a transparent media like the watercolor or the ink. I'll play around with the opacity and I'll play around with the water levels. These look a little more solid, so maybe I'll use the oils and the express oils or the ink pen and get that kind of a feel and look, and play around with it and push it. Because remember, even though these are labeled oil, watercolor, ink, you don't really have to think of them that way, other than just remembering that one's a little bit more opaque, one's a little bit more translucent, one is a little bit more textured than the other. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I can mix oil and water all I want, okay, and have it. You also don't have to have your reference picture here. You can have it up on a reference window just by going to Window and doing Reference Images, and then you would load the image into there, okay? I've got both of these layers selected. I can hit T for transform, and then I can move those 2 layers around together, or I could just go down and group them into a folder and then transform all of that together as well. But I think that gives you an idea of kind of how I would go about and reference it. If you have questions, and this is for anybody, Nigel, if you have questions or anybody else has questions, just let me know. The nice thing about selecting this background here is, like, if there's a light area like this right here, then because I've got this darkened, okay, I could make a new layer, and then in here I could come in and just start laying in some of that color. And getting that feel for it. So anyway, this has been about a 30-minute video. So I hope this is helpful. I hope you guys got something out of this. Let me know if you have any questions at all, either on YouTube or Patreon. All right. Have a great rest of the day or evening or morning or whatever it is where you're at. Thank you so much for being a supporter. God bless.